Welcome to the All About Us podcast show, where we explore the stories, transformations, and human experiences that connect us all. I'm your host, Carl Allen. Today's guest is someone whose work sits beautifully at the intersection of healing, creativity, and cultural reflection. Valerie Blair is a marketing executive and the founder of A Light in the Chaos, a platform that supports people navigating grief, stress, and life transformations through storytelling, coaching, and courses. After the loss of her partner, rebuilt her life through synchronicity, creative reflection, and soul work. Now she helps others rediscover their sense of connection and purpose, creating tools that turn pain into insight and loss into renewal. Our conversation today is titled Finding Light in Chaos, Rebuilding After Loss Through Cultural Creativity. Val, it's an honor to have you here. Let's begin. How are you
It's an
doing
honor
today?
to be here. I am well. How are you today?
Well, I don't know how God crosses our paths, but just this morning, I had some troubling information with a death, that I was not expecting. And so it was very difficult for me to even bring myself to do this show today. But here I am, and there's a reason. I guess you were scheduled. So, Val, can you take us back to the beginning of your journey, to the moment when life shifted after losing your partner?
Exactly. And the first thing I do want to say, when God speaks in loudly, whether it is through connection just like this. And God spoke to me in the same way about 13 years ago. My life changed. I was an executive for a media network, television network, and all of a sudden I received a package from Amazon that was a necklace. It started off simple, a necklace that I had ordered, but it had a cross that said love never fails. And immediately in that moment, my body knew what my mind didn't, that something was wrong and I had to get home. And as I was rushing home, all I could just think about is just my husband and just how much I am so thankful for him to be in my life, not knowing what was going to await me when I got home. And when I got home, the doors were locked from the inside, and the police had to come and open the door. And my husband had passed away. And that person that I was when I left him obviously was not the same person when I arrived home. And since then, it has been a journey for 13 years of what I call coming back home to myself.
That's very, very tragic there, But I have to ask this question: did your husband have any previous medical issues, or was this something that just happened all of a sudden?
So, and that's a great question. So he had been struggling with mental health issues, and so he was diagnosed as being bipolar. And we had gone through for years different types of treatments, but he always had a reaction to each of the medications. And this time, it was a reaction to the medication. So it started as losing my memory. So I had in the need to wanting to reconnect with him and needing to keep him with me. As the brain goes into a trauma, it starts forgetting the day to day things. And so forgot how to put on my clothes, how to use utensils to eat. And this went on for about 6 months. And thankfully, I had a community, not only from where I lived, but my own tribe who were with me, and we did what we called mini rituals, where we had post-it notes throughout the whole house that would tell me, "Wake up, brush your teeth," and these little things that seem silly, but were really lifesavers for me. And having that community stay with me and support me was really important. But then we also had moments, what I would call synchronicities, that also started weaving themselves in and letting me know that even though I may have felt alone, I was not alone in this world. And that is what started me into the healing journey.
That's wow. So that's kind of like a double blow there. Is there some type of name or for this type of trauma that you experienced, or?
So it is So it goes by different names, but what I have learned, it is when people experience it, it's cumulative grief or chronic grief. And so we this is and so that everyone knows we all grieve differently. How we grieve a mother would may be different from how we grieve a child and how we grieve even our partner. And I had lost pretty much my parents, grandparents, everyone in my family. And with those experiences, I grieved them differently. When I lost Derek, all of a sudden it was like the world fell off underneath my feet. And that was a different type of grief. So it affected me emotionally. And because, as you may be aware, sometimes in our community, we learn to move on and to power through sometimes. And so sometimes by doing that and not addressing our grief physically and mentally, it affects us. And so when I didn't address my grief immediately, it became mental fogginess, not remembering, and then it went into health issues as well.
Okay. You've spoken about synchronicity playing a role in your healing. What kinds of signs or experiences help you feel guided through that time?
So I'm going to say the first sign was I had this moment where I was sitting by the water and just trying to recollect my energy because I was going through just a really hard day, and a bee landed on me, and all of a sudden I have this bee and I'm about to start freaking out, and the bee, as many times as I got up to try to move, the bee just kept following me until all of a sudden it just landed on my hand and it just stayed there with me. And it stayed there for about an hour and it didn't move, it didn't go anywhere. And it was in that moment where I was able to be quiet and reconnect with myself. And it brought me back to life. And then that was just the start of other synchronicities.
Spiritually, I would think that was your partner. And,
Yes.
coming back to guide you, back to where you needed to be. Amazing story. How did creativity begin to enter your process?
So it started entering. So after that B moment, I started taking longer walks and it turned into these 3 hour, 6 hour hikes. And in those moments, I also brought my camera with me and I would ask a simple prompt: what do I need right now in this moment? And it could be the answer was, I feel angry. I need support. I need to feel peace and quiet. And with the camera, I started taking photographs of those answers. And that was how a light in the chaos started, because I would upload the photos, the blogs, the music, and everything into this repository to document what I was going through and to have an outlet for my emotions.
Okay. The name of your platform, A Light in the Chaos, feels both poetic and grounded. What does that phrase mean to you personally?
Personally, it means that we can't escape chaos. And indeed, each of us has a different chaos that happens in our lives, whether it is because of family, community, or career, or even just in finding ourselves. But just because we have lost or we are in the chaos doesn't mean we have lost our light. So the light and the light to attract others and community to come to support us is always there. We just need to find it.
Okay. What were some of the first moments when you began to sense the light returning, even faintly after the loss?
So it was also another synchronicity in which I went back to work and I found myself alone in the elevator with Deepak Chopra. And I was in that moment because I literally was ready to turn around and go back home because I was just feeling just all the feels. And he looked at me and just said, just the quietest, just have a lovely day, which is just a simple phrase, but it meant that someone saw me. And from that moment, it was, I am here and there's a reason that I am here. And that was what was the spark in finding the curiosity as well as the grace to give myself grace to then find the light again.
Interesting. How did storytelling, whether through writing or conversation, help you make sense of your experience?
So I think for all of us, because we're community driven and we're humans, um, our family, and we pass stories down through our family, one as a history and to record what has happened, but also to help bring healing and to bring hope. And so with the storytelling, I was able to share my story, but also my story became the message to help others so that they knew that they were not alone. And so that is how storytelling really played a role in my healing, but in healing for others.
Okay. What role does faith, intuition, or spirituality play in your understanding of transformation?
So for myself, I am lucky in which I had a very diverse family. So one side was Baptist, the other side was Catholic, and then my grandmother was also a mixture of shamanism and everything else. And so I grew up in the faith tradition. However, when Derek passed away, there was a moment in which I told God I was done and I couldn't do this anymore because at the age of 36, I was the only person left. And it was hard to have to find faith again. But through, again, the five frameworks that I have developed, which was the storytelling, creativity, and just other tools, it really helped me to see that even though I can't see what's on the other side of the road, that there was a purpose and there's a reason for me going through what I did. And by connecting to that part, it then allowed me to rebuild my faith and rebuild my spirituality.
You often use the creative reflection. What does that look like in your daily practice?
So that looks like being in your car. And for me, if I was in the car feeling emotions, listening to DMX, or maybe for someone, you're listening to classical music or whatever it is your choice. It may be scribbling and using colors and paints to showcase what emotions you're feeling. It's just allowing yourself to just be, whether it is through music, whether it is through your writing, through your artwork, or even through your voice by singing or by poetic or poetry.
How can creativity, whether through journaling, art, or ritual, help someone process pain in a healthy way?
So, what I often talk about issues in your tissues. Excuse me. So when we do not allow our emotions to have an outlet, then it presents itself physically and mentally. So creativity doesn't ask us to be perfect. It just asks us to be present. And so through the creative process and storytelling, writing, music, or whatever your art form is, it allows then us to acknowledge the emotions, to then see what it is and give it a place to be. And it also allows us to start processing those emotions. And we don't have to be perfect and we don't have to get it all right, but it does give an outlet to those emotions.
What do you say to people who feel blocked or afraid to face their grief creatively?
I say for everything, just start small, right? And so it could be if you feel that you can't draw because you think you need to be Picasso, that's okay. Then clip out either pieces from a magazine or go on Pinterest or on your phone and just put images together. All of these things are creative and you are tapping into creativity. And if you don't think that you're a storyteller, maybe again, you're just looking at books that then fuel you and inspire you. All of these little things really add up into your creativity. So we're all creative. It's just our idea of what we think creativity is.
Do you find that act of creating often leads to self discovery you didn't expect?
I do. I think sometimes when we are in that creative mode, especially if we use the example of me listening to DMX, sometimes I'll have a thought and it's just like an aha moment that I didn't think about before. So again, creativity just moves us out from what I call future tripping, which is sometimes worrying about what hasn't happened or thinking about what has happened in the past. And it puts us right here in the present to have those clear and clarifying thoughts.
I don't often pigeonhole people, but you do not look like a DMX fan. I'm going to go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna say I used to be a DJ, and so, yes, I I used to mix hip hop and house music together. That was my
Oh,
thing.
wow. That had to be interesting. I've never seen or I've never heard that. I'm going to digress a little bit because it's quite interesting. What? Nah, let me get this together. Where were you born and what was your upbringing like?
So I was born, and those who are listening to this podcast will probably say that they don't believe me. I was born in the South Bronx. I was born in the South Bronx, and I was born into a family, as I said, that were of two polar opposites. So one family came from the South, the other from the North. One was Baptist, the other was Catholic. So also in different, just so many differences. And so it taught me how to be humble. It taught me how to really be empathetic and be able to get along with everyone. But it also invited me to different experiences. So my grandmother was a producer, my uncle was a playwright. He did bubbling brown sugar. And so I was in that world of just the art scene and history and African American culture, and it was just such a beautiful and wonderful experience. An equally wonderful experience was being on my mother's side, which was into just they were deeply into church and deeply into community and helping others. And so my upbringing has been eclectic and very interesting.
What was your academic background like?
So went to a Catholic elementary, then an all girls school. And again, it was very interesting because it shows me how life always carries you and to where you need to be. And so in my head, I thought I was going to go to a different school and I was going to be an astronaut. And life just kind of brought me into going to Colgate. And it was all of these things in which I won because, as you know, up north it's cold and I didn't want to be up there. And I tried not to get accepted into Colgate. Um, it was God wanted me to go there, and so he sent the dean of admissions to come down and personally give me a test, and also sat with me as I wrote my essay to then submit to Colgate. That is where I ended, and I went into international relations and environmental science. And when I came out in my head, I was going to go from being an astronaut to an international lawyer, and it didn't work out that way. I went into marketing.
It happens. Cultural ritual and memory. That's what we're going to talk about now. You said that culture and ritual have shaped your healing. How do you see cultural memory influencing the way we experience grief?
I think when we have a challenging moment, we look back on how our family have how they dealt with certain things. And I remember when my grandmother, because she lost all of her children, she went into meditation a lot. And so I looked back at her and the resilience that she had. And that was one of the things that I can reach out to and hold on to in tapping into our ancestors. And I think for many of us, when we're going through challenging moments, we do tap into our ancestry and we tap into community, which is also, I think, very important. And so for me, it has always been knowing that I'm surrounded by that, that has also been very supportive during this journey.
Yeah, because you mentioned something that's very, very interesting. We're used to children burying their parents.
Yes.
It has to be a totally just mind blowing experience to be a parent burying your children, more or less burying all of your children.
Yes, exactly. It is, and so in that moment especially, I had to become somewhat of the child from my grandmother and also her partner. And so I was privy into a lot of the ways that my grandparents how they handled stress because I wasn't raised as a typical child. And so that also helped me.
Okay. Are there rituals or traditions, personal or cultural, that helped you reconnect your sense of belonging?
So, some of what I will call a ritual, which is also a tradition, is for New Year's. My family would always set the table for our loved ones who have passed away. And that is something that I continue to do. And so for all of my loved ones, and it's a full table, I make at midnight a whole meal and then set the table. And my friends will come over and we'll also have place settings for our loved ones. And so that has become something that just so that we remember and we honor. And I know it's done in different cultures, like for Day of the Dead and for other types of traditions. So that is one. The other one is also, which is a ritual of always for myself, every single night before I go to bed, I do say one thing to my husband that I learned and one thing that I was able to give. And that is something that I say it to him, but it's also for me. And I'm sure for other people, they may have rituals that they may connect to that then helps them as well.
Okay. How can people create their own meaningful rituals when traditional ones don't quite fit their story?
I think you look back at the things that really brought you joy. So what brings you joy and what brings you peace? And it may not fit what other people may call a ritual or tradition, but you make it your own. So if you are someone who if you travel a lot, then make that into a ritual. If you are someone who goes into prayer or meditation, make that a ritual. Whatever it is that brings you joy, reconnect with those moments and that will then help carry you through as well.
What have you learned about how memory and love continue to live within us even after loss?
I think someone I remember I went to a widows group and someone said love is grief is love that has no place to go. And it was something that really stayed with me because, again, I had to remember just all the memories with my husband, but also with my family as well, and how they have shaped me into who I am today. And that mixed with gratitude, being thankful for me to have the opportunity for them to be in my life and for me to be in their life as well, is what really carried me into holding that love and knowing that love doesn't die. If we go back to that moment where the Amazon package came, where it was the crosses that love never fails, it definitely was a testament to that. Love never fails, whether your loved one is here or on the other side.
After hearing your experience, me myself, I'm getting a little concerned. I'm getting a little concerned for myself because I find death one of the very difficult things to process. Unfortunately, I believe that I probably don't grieve properly. My process is more so, I just don't believe that the person is dead. And it's just, you go through the funeral, the repast, and everything else, but I just don't believe that they're dead. And then, the situation and everything starts to fade. And then at other times, it'll hit me again, maybe 2 or 3 years later. And, I'll get emotional about it. But, I do think the grieving process is important and is probably something I haven't done properly.
So the first thing that I would like to share is that there's no right or wrong way for us to grieve. So, and I've heard just working with so many people, there's some people who come to me and they're upset because they're happy, right? And so they travel and they do all of these things that their loved one did and then they feel guilty, why am I happy? Or there are other people who do not believe in our loved ones crossing over and they think that they're lost and they're just gone. And so for each of those people, I say you have to feel what you have to feel. And so if you feel anger. And the one thing I will also say is our loved ones, as lovely as they are, I think death and grief is something that is very difficult for us to talk about. And so, what sometimes our loved ones will do, they want to see us happy. And so they'll try to say, it's okay, Carl, don't feel sad, right? And but really what we then say, it's okay for me to feel sad. It's okay for me to feel angry. And it's also okay for me to feel absolutely nothing. It's really that process of getting those emotions out, which is really important.
Okay. Guiding others through transition. What inspired you to turn your personal experience into a platform to help others?
So it was another synchronistic moment in which I had been back to work for probably for a few months and the chronic grief was not becoming better. I was seeing a therapist and nothing seemed to help. And even the tools and books that were out there were not helping. And so I needed an outlet in order to one, express my emotions, but two, I needed someone to understand what was happening. And so, as I said, it started with the creative process of having a light in the chaos, but then it also started with a panic attack. And I had a panic attack. I thought that I was going to have to go to the hospital. And the only thing that I can think about was please make sure that someone finds my car because it was in an illegal spot. And I was like, and that was the thing that I thought about at that moment if something happened to me. And in that moment, I saw my husband and he said, if you're ready, we can go together. And as I was about to take his hand, in that split second, I thought about all of the people I could help if I turned my mess into my message. And I said, I'm not ready yet. I have work to do. And that is when I woke up from the panic attack and I knew I had to shift the blog into an actual platform.
Okay. When you coach or teach people going through grief or change, what common patterns do you notice?
So the first thing that I've noticed is that there is no thing as a such thing as a pattern because everyone grieves differently. Um, However, I do notice that there is confusion and they often follows the 5 stages of grief. So the anger, the collective bargaining and everything. And so when I notice that, I listen. Where is the person I'm working with? Where are they at this moment? And what is it that they need? Because oftentimes, after the funeral, after the family have sent all of their condolences, it's just them and their thoughts. And so, and there's no one to listen many times. And what is it that they need? So I listen, and then that's when we start doing the work together.
How do you balance practical guidance with emotional or spiritual support?
So I have to thank the marketing part of me to be able to balance, right, the technical and the spiritual part, and also to know that we're all different. And so that is how, for example, I created a framework in which it is mindful and it's intentional, but it is practical that you do not need to be spiritual, listen to meditation music or anything like that. It just allows you to just be. And so I'm always mindful of making sure people feel comfortable where they are, whether they are spiritual or whether they are someone who is non practicing.
What do you think is the most misunderstood part of healing from grief?
I think many people think that when they hear the word healing, it means moving on. And that is not really what the healing process is about. It's about being present and knowing where you are in the storm so that then you can move forward with it. The grief is always going to be there. It changes shapes. Sometimes it hides. It may come back with and lets itself be known. And whether it's 5 years or 50 years, we will always feel that grief. But it is how do we sit presently with it and walk with it and not try to walk away from it.
Rebuilding and moving forward. Before I do that, let me do this. Let's go into flip mode. I want you
Okay.
to ask me 3 questions.
Well, I would say my first question for you is what is your definition of creative ritual?
My definition of creative ritual is just something anchored within me as to how I want to approach a situation, a particular day or holiday. There's just particular things about me. I'm probably, even though I'm a single parent, I am probably more family oriented. And so
Mhm.
it's the sort of thing whereas there're just certain things that are really important to me. What was one of the real things, creative ritual was when my sons were under the age of 18, I would cook almost every day. I believed in taking them to amusement parks. That was something we did every every summer during their teenage year. We would get a season pass, and we'd spend a lot of weekends at Hershey Park. cooking full meals for my sons on holidays because I never wanted them. I'm not their mother. I wasn't trying to replace their mother, but it was very important to me for them to not to miss particular things that I remember about my childhood. So I wanted to try my best to give them that, if any of that makes any sense to you.
It does make sense, and so it's you're creating that memory bank for your children. It's I love it. It's how you create legacy with through your children, through the love of cooking and presence and just being there with them.
Well, one of my greatest memories, of growing up in my house was I could always tell when it was a holiday
Mm.
because my mother would probably get up like at 4 or 5 in the morning and start cooking. And by the time I would wake up on the weekend or the holiday around 7 or 8 o'clock, you could smell the aroma of all the food moving through the house. And so, it's just one of those memories. It's just one of those memories which impacted me, something that I hold on to, and something that was very important for me to pass on to my children.
I love that. It's right a part of that ancestral connection. And so then that leads me to my second question about community and what does community mean to you?
I, over time, became a very, how can I say it, indigenous oriented person. And I didn't want to separate us. And so I believe we're all one big community. And that's what this podcast show really is all about. A lot of white people, they'll look at the show and they'll say, wow, I want to come on your show, but I'm not indigenous. I said, come on this show and tell your story because
Mhm.
this is how we all bond together and how we relate and how we see that in so many ways we're different, but even in more ways we are the same. And so my community is the world, reaching out and touching people, their lives and their experiences one by one.
I love it. My last question, which is the fun question, is so you didn't believe that I listen to DMX. So what song do you listen to when you're having challenges or a tough day?
I express everything through music. I either do one or two things. When I'm having a difficult time, if somebody goes on my regular Facebook page, I will just post like a litany of music,
Mhm.
sometimes between 5 to 10 songs, 5 to 15 songs. On my Facebook page just to guide me through that experience and just so I can get whatever's in me out, or
Mm.
I'll go to sleep like I did today. I don't do depression like most people do. I either express it via music or I go to sleep.
Mhm. Yep. Well, thank you very much. I look well, if you at the end of this podcast can share one song with me, I will put it in my playlist then.
Okay, rebuilding and moving forward.
Yes.
As someone who has turned suffering into strength, what does rebuilding look like now in your everyday life?
Rebuilding is really just about being, again, for me, aware and present. And so every day is not going to be a great day, but I have gratitude for every single thing that happens in my life. And for me, I know that that's not the case. That may not be the case for everyone, but it for me that has been my journey and how I have come to that space. And everything that I do is in honor of my ancestors and of my community. And that is what rebuilding has been for me.
What practices or mindsets continue to keep you grounded and open to joy?
So the practice that I is most important that I share with everyone is I call it the 5 light anchors. So the first one is to name the 5 things that you can see. So for me, I wake up and I look at the sunrise, and that is something that anchors me and tells me in nature, even the ordinary can be beautiful. The next thing is the 4 things that you can touch. And whether it's if you're touching your hands or holding something warm, that helps me regulate my nervous system, and it also tells me that I'm here. The 3 things that you can hear, the also 2 emotions that you're carrying, and it's important not to have judgment. So again, if I say, you know what, I'm very angry, then I am angry and I allow myself to feel that. And then the last thing is the truth that I need to hear. And sometimes the truth can be just breathe. Sometimes it could be, you know what, you don't feel safe. Right. And so those are the frameworks that I use to help me with connection.
How has this journey changed your understanding of love, purpose, and connection?
I ended up getting a tattoo of it, and it's the path of life, and basically it's all of these different movements that tells us no matter what direction we go in, we always end up where we need to be, and that love also travels with us in that path. And so for me, there is no such thing as death. It's just a continuation. So that is how I went from saying I am a loser, meaning I feel like I lose people, into being I am surrounded by love.
When you think about your future, both personally and through a light in chaos, what do you hope to create or share next?
So right now, what I'm working on with the light in the chaos is really to make everything accessible. Before it was in order to connect with me, you had to do a one-on-one. Now it's I'm creating courses in which people can just go and self-take it themselves. And also I just want to make it accessible to everyone. So no matter where you live, whatever your situation is, it is free for all and available to all. So that is where I see a light in the chaos going, just as a platform, and me personally to be able to do more retreats with people, as well as experiences and building community so people know they're not alone.
Where can my listeners who are experiencing grief right now or have problems processing their grief, how do they actually connect with you and the resources you have available?
Of course. And so if to connect with me, you can go onto the website, alightinthechaos.com. And there is a library of just tools and resources, as well as the blog that started A Light in the Chaos. And that takes you to the very beginning of the grief journey, in which then there were tools and books and resources in there. There are also meditations, as well as music and the creative prompts that we talked about today. And if that is something that you just want to dip your toe in quickly, you can also go onto Instagram. Every day I post something that really brings a light and joy to other people.
Okay, we're going to have all those that information, the links on your promos and on the promos and on the show notes for the actual show. You asked a question earlier. What song would I hand over to you as something to carry with you about me and how I process grief? I would use a Prince song called Adore. Until the end of time, I'll be there for you. You are my heart and mind. I truly adore you.
I love it.
And for me, because we all go through relationships ending, and that's almost kind of like death in a sense. But for me, I don't think I do that like most people do. Even when my relationships end, I still carry a level of love for you.
Hmm.
And so, and that's how I actually think it really should be. But that's for me at least. Anyways, closing reflections for those listening who are in the early stage of grief. What would you want them to know?
I mean, the other from knowing that they're not alone, it's again, chaos happens, and life changes, and it can change in a blink of an eye. However, we have that anchor if we connect with our community and our loved ones that will help us get through it.
If there's one truth that guided you through the darkest moments, what was it?
It goes back to the cross that love never fails,
Okay. And finally, what does finding light in chaos mean to you now after everything you lived and learned?
that I'm still here, and so are you.
Correct, correct. Val, thank you for sharing your story and your wisdom with such honesty and grace. You remind us all that even in chaos, there can be meaning, that creativity memory, and connection can rebuild what feels lost. For our listeners, you can learn more about Val's work and her platform, A Light in Chaos, through the links in the episode show notes. This has been the All About Us podcast show, where we explore the stories that connect us to ourselves, to each other, and to the world around us. Until next time, stay open, stay kind, stay connected. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.